journalist Eoghan Corry has been there quite a few times. Good afternoon, Eoghan.
Oh, good afternoon, Sean.
Now, the bit that they knocked down, I assume, isn't kind of in where most tourists would visit.
No, you won't see many postcards of it. It's sort of one of those where it's made out of banked earth, and it's in the Shaanxi province, pretty far north of where the tourists would normally go, because all the tourist visits to the Great Wall are actually in the very heavily fortified sections close to Beijing. Day trip out of Beijing, everybody toddles up there, walks along a bit of the wall, gets their T-shirt or whatever in the gift shop, and back to Beijing. The construction workers weren't exactly around that bit, thankfully.
Yes, and so the bit that people would tend to visit, is that kind of actually constructed with bricks? Is it a bit like the walls in Derry, say?
A very, very similar analogy. Good analogy, Sean. What happened really with the Great Wall was it was built over thousands and thousands of years. A lot of it built around 200 BC. But the postcardy bits, the Instagram bits, are all from the 1500s, when the Ming dynasty constructed strong fortifications near Beijing, the mighty Ming, nothing to do with Luke Flanagan, but they were the dynasty that ruled the Chinese empire at the time. Now, they're all very pretty. They go along hilly sections. The bits that people go to tend to be, there are about 5 that are on the day trip schedule. Badaling would be very famous. It was developed around the night, first of them to be developed in the end of the 1950s. That's where Richard Nixon went on his great famous trip. That's where Margaret Thatcher, when they're all shaking hands with people. But there are other ones, and they're relatively accessible from Beijing. The most beautiful of them all is quite a distance away, and it's Jinshanling, and that's I recommend. It's a longer way. It's about 6 hours. And if you can go January, February, when it's absolutely freezing, it's a terrific experience. And it's obviously the least touristed of the touristy ones.
Yeah. Okay, so, sorry, Eoghan, because that line...
Oh, dear. Did I break down?
Where are you at now, Eoghan? Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you, yes. I can hear you.
Sorry about that. Yeah, it all kind of broke up there. So, like, the bit where these two chaps knocked down, it wouldn't be particularly scenic. It would probably be relatively easy to knock it down, would it?
Pretty easy to mistake it as well, because it's banked earth. It'd be like one of those ring forts we have on the hills of Ireland, that sometimes get vandalised by construction workers. So it's something that you could imagine would happen, but the Chinese are taking a very dim view of it. I'd imagine this is regarded as a major disrespect to a national icon, and in China the legal system doesn't give you very much room for defending those sort of charges.
Yeah, and just to prevent people wasting their money or just their effort texting in to say, but you can see it from space, that's a myth, is it?
18th century, Sean. It was being written about in the 1700s, long before space travel. And it's one of those things that just, it got implanted in people's heads. There are loads of things about the Great Wall that people, because so much happened in China in the 50s and 60s, there was a very strong rumour that particularly the touristy bit around Badaling was just constructed in the last 30 years for the tourists. Not really true at all. It's about 500 years old, and so are the other 4 or 5 day trippy places out of Beijing. But you've got to remember, it's 20,000 kilometres long altogether. That's a survey done in 2012. So that means it would take you from Dublin to Beijing and back to Dublin and all the way back to about Afghanistan. That's the length of the wall. It's huge.
That's an extraordinary achievement when you consider it that way. Eoghan, thanks a million. Lovely to talk to you again.
Always a great pleasure, Sean.
Eoghan Corry there. That's our lot for today. Kieran's up next.